U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that Iran was running out of time to prevent an American military intervention as the Islamic Republic rejects holding negotiations over its nuclear program. Posting on Truth Social on Wednesday, Trump wrote, "Hopefully Iran will quickly come to table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal, no nuclear deal, one that is good for all parties." Trump said a massive armada was heading to Iran and moving quickly and with great power. It is a larger fleet, headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln, than that sent to Venezuela. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission, with speed and violence, if necessary, Trump wrote. Trump reminded that the U.S. Army carried out the Operation Midnight Hammer targeting key Iran's nuclear facilities in June last year after Tehran refused to come to the negotiation table. The U.S. president warned that the next attack will be far worse. This was not the first warning to Tehran. Last week, Trump said an armada was heading toward Iran but that he hoped that he wouldn't have to use it. The armada that Trump referred to is a U.S. naval strike group led by aircraft carrier the USS Abraham Lincoln that has arrived in the Middle East. The dispatch of the warships came as U.S.-Iranian tensions heightened after the Iranian government's brutal crackdown on protests across Iran in recent weeks. Trump has repeatedly warned that he would step in if Iran kept killing protesters, although the nationwide demonstrations sparked by economic hardship and political repression have since died down. He has also said the United States would respond if Tehran restarts its nuclear program after the June airstrikes by Israeli and U.S. forces on major nuclear sites.
Even though a U.S. attack on Iran could happen at any moment, there's currently a long waiting period. It could stretch on for weeks. Walla writes about this. This strategy is familiar to the United States. In July 1990, Saddam Hussein's army invaded Kuwait. President George H.W. Bush promised to expel the Iraqis, but the war only began in January 1991. 6 months after the conflict began. This suggests the U.S. is acting patiently. The opportunity to strike was missed during the mass protests in Iran 2 weeks ago. Now, there's no longer any need for haste. The planned attack will be multidimensional, including massive strikes and cyber operations. Electronic warfare will also be used to disrupt military communications. The U.S. intends to use the remaining time for 2 additional actions: tightening economic sanctions against Iran and identifying rifts among the elite in order to lure some forces to overthrow the regime. The situation in Iran can be compared to the plot of Star Wars. In the first film, the forces of good fight tyranny. Currently, dark forces reign in Iran, but historically, evil is ultimately defeated. The fate of the regime is still unknown, but the United States is striving to portray itself as the leader in the fight against this threat. Despite the regime's effectiveness in suppressing protests, its capabilities are limited. The Iranian Revolution has long since lost its former fervor and persuasiveness. The economic situation is not improving. In China, authoritarianism remains, but the government ensures economic growth and stability. This is not the case in Iran. Moreover, the rift between radicals and moderates within the elite is becoming increasingly visible. The president understands that economic reforms are essential for stability. Controlling inflation, lowering food prices, and ensuring stable supplies of water and electricity. This will require cutting military spending and aid to proxies like Hezbollah. This will increase tensions within the government, which could worsen after Khamenei's death and the start of a struggle for succession. Even a small shift by some of the elite to the opposition could reignite protests. This process could take weeks or months, possibly continuing until 2026 or beyond. The historical logic of events is predictable for now. Regarding Israel, the security establishment believes that an American attack could provoke an Iranian strike against Israel. But the likelihood of this is questionable. If Iran focuses on the United States, an attack on Israel will not be a priority. The question then arises, should Israel intervene? The answer is complex. On the one hand, there is a temptation to eliminate a long-term threat. On the other, the United States may not want Israel's participation. The history of the 1991 and 2003 Gulf Wars shows that America is opposed to Israel's involvement in the conflict. Concerns are growing in the Persian Gulf countries that the US could launch a large-scale military operation against the Iranian leadership. Local sources assess the likelihood of a strike as high. This is due to the buildup of American forces in the Middle East. One informed source stated that it seems like it's only a matter of time. However, it's unclear whether the White House knows exactly what actions President Trump is planning. Some sources claim the preparations are being conducted in strict secrecy. Others describe the situation around the president as chaotic. Various strike options are reportedly being considered, including targeted strikes on key targets, a naval blockade of Iran, or a full-scale attack on the country's leadership. Russian propagandists have begun to sharply change their rhetoric and are increasingly asking, why does Russia need new Ukrainian territories if it doesn't have the money to maintain them? Ukrainian journalist Denis Kazansky stated this while commenting on a conversation between two well-known Z-bloggers from Vladimir Solovyov's channel, Razvedos and Fighter Bomber. According to them, even the already captured regions are in a state of destruction, and reconstruction requires colossal funds, which Russia simply does not have. Instead of previous appeals to go further and capture new areas, propagandists are now openly talking about financial depletion and lack of resources, thereby telling their viewers about the need to stop the occupation of new territories. Kazansky noted that even in 2022, the same people assured the audience that the war would be quick and easy, and now they justify the failure by the fact that the state does not have the money and opportunities to feed new regions. In his opinion, such a change in methods is directly related to the protracted war, sanctions, and real economic pressure on Russia. Tellingly, the propagandists focused particularly on Mariupol and other long-occupied cities, acknowledging that reconstruction there is merely symbolic and does not address the larger problems. In fact, they themselves refuted previous claims of a rebirth of the captured territories. Kazansky believes this rhetorical shift demonstrates an awareness of resource limitations and an attempt to prepare the public to believe that further expansion into Ukraine is not only pointless but also dangerous for Russia itself. He also asks a logical question. If even propagandists acknowledge the futility of these conquests, then why does the Kremlin continue the war and the destruction of new cities? In this case, front lines of the war between Ukraine and Russia have undergone radical changes. While tanks and heavy armored vehicles played a key role at the beginning of the invasion, drones now control the battlefield almost entirely. A recent article in the New York Times notes that drones are now used not only for reconnaissance, but also for precision strikes, which has led to the use of heavy equipment becoming less common. As military officials and analysts note, Russian troops are increasingly sending small groups of infantry into battle, moving on foot or on motorcycles, hoping to be less visible to drones. However, weather conditions are making adjustments to this tactic. In winter, trees lose their leaves, making it more difficult for soldiers to hide. Footprints are easily visible in the snow, and the cold enhances the effectiveness of thermal imaging, making positions more visible from the air. Heavy snowfalls and fog make it more difficult for drones to observe, and it's precisely during these times that both sides often attempt to advance. Ukrainian military officials note that freezing temperatures complicate not only the lives of infantry, but also the operation of their equipment. Drone batteries drain faster, And in snow and cold, some drones fail completely. Because of this, soldiers are forced to remain in cover longer and move less frequently to avoid being hit. Experts believe that winter favors the defensive. In adverse weather conditions, large-scale attacks are more difficult to conduct, meaning holding positions becomes more important than advancing. Despite the dominance of drones, infantry still plays a decisive role, holding the front line even when equipment and weather work against them. In these circumstances, the increasing losses of the Russians are also causing discontent in Russia.